Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Schuman. Going to be giving an overview of nudge theory, and most of the content from this presentation comes from the book Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein from the University of Chicago. I've been reading this book, and it's been a pretty enjoyable read. It's casual, kind of some humor in it as well. So I would highly recommend picking it up for yourself as well. So in this presentation, I'll be giving some definitions of what a nudge is, going over some key components of nudge theory, connecting nudge theory and heuristics and biases, and then giving some critiques of nudge theory, and closing out with some current day examples that I found. So in the introduction of nudge, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein give the following definition. Any aspect of the choice architecture that alters people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding options or significantly changing their economic incentives. So some key things in this definition is one of the focuses is on the choice architecture. And then also we're not trying to strong arm anybody into making certain decisions. So you're not going to be eliminating options, and you're not going to be creating huge incentives to influence behavior. Later on in the book, they refine this or add to this definition to be a nudge is any factor that significantly alters the behavior of humans that normally is ignored by econs. And econs are kind of their term for economists or governments or people who are trying to track people's behavior or create the statistics on behavioral scientists. So it's just kind of getting away from the normal interventions, the normal statistics that we see on behavior. And then some further categories that I found on what nudges are. The first category, kind of breaking it down, a nudge can be an intervention that interferes with a choice conditions minimally. Then the second category of nudges is an intervention that uses rationality failures instrumentally. And then the third, welfare promoting intervention that tries to reduce the negative impacts of rationality failures. So I want to highlight in categories 2 and 3, this is where we connect nudge theory to heuristics and biases. So you're either trying to partner with those irrationalities to help move with that inertia to create the best decision, or you're trying to mitigate the consequences of those biases or heuristics that cause irrational behavior. And then going into some key components of nudge theory. The first is choice architecture. In the book, Thaler and Sunstein kind of convey choice architecture as the context that we make our decisions in. So, or the environment that we make our decisions in. And they really highlight how important the environment that we make our decisions in is in the outcome of our decisions. So there's so many details that matter in the way that we make our decisions. For example, just the ordering of a ballot can influence the votes that are casted. The first listed candidate can get more votes just because they're the first. So that's kind of, we're falling into irrational choice there. But the fact is that it does matter, and it does have influence. So sometimes we're in the position of a choice architect, where we can design these environments or have to design these environments for people to make the decisions in. So they kind of show how that really is an important decision, and we can implement nudges if we pay attention to common scenarios where people could benefit from being nudged. As a choice architect, we can help people maximize their utilities. Um, and then going into the next one, which is libertarian paternalism. So these are two kind of seemingly contradictory words. And libertarian gets at the freedom of choice, freedom of the individual or the market to make the best decision for themselves. You don't want to limit anything in libertarianism. And then there's paternalism, which kind of gets at the root word of, parenting. And that paternalism, you want the best for your child or your constituents or population. So there's this desire to keep the balance of freedom of choice, but then also you want the best for the best health, the best financial well-being, the best options available for your population. So that there's this tension there in nudge theory. And I think that's a really important foundation for nudge theory. And then going into when we should nudge. So sometimes we're in the position of being a choice architect, like I mentioned before, and knowing when people are prone to make mistakes or when they could benefit from nudges helps us as a choice architect to implement nudges. And then also when we're the choice or the decision makers to identify, hey, these are the areas where I'm prone to making mistakes. So just at a high level, difficult decisions, infrequent decisions, when feedback loop is slow, and then the cost and stakes of decisions are high. All of these are scenarios where we may be prone to make bad decisions, and having a little bit of help to push us towards the best option for ourselves, it would be helpful to again maximize the consequences of our decisions. And then this kind of ties into heuristics and biases. So there's common failures of our decision making where we act irrationally, and these are really highlighted in like delayed consequences, when we have the instant gratification of that candy bar, but then we pay the consequences later. So in those scenarios where there's a time in between the benefit and the consequence, we could benefit from a nudge to remind us that, hey, that's not a good decision to make. And then degrees of difficulty, the decisions that we make that are difficult are much harder, or we're much more prone to make mistakes in those decisions than decisions that we make every day of which path to take when we're going home. And then there's the frequency again, that goes into, we make those daily decisions. The more we make those decisions, probably the better off that we are on deciding what's best for ourselves. But for those, buying a home, those infrequent decisions, we could benefit from nudges. And then there's, if we don't get any feedback, we may not know if that was a good decision or not. So nudges can be implemented to either give that feedback or shorten that feedback loop, so that we know if that was a good decision or not. And then there's situations where we just don't know what our preference is. We haven't been in that situation before, so we have no idea what to decide. So if this is our first time kind of in that environment, nudge theory can maybe help us make that decision to maximize the happiness or health or financial well-being. And then there's some critiques that I found of nudge theory. This is mainly from the article From Mechanism to Virtue, the evaluation of nudge theory. One of the main critiques they had is nudges does have a pretty broad and loose definition, so it's kind of hard to know what a nudge is and isn't sometimes, and how that differs from some of the traditional interventions that we've had from our government or from parents or other authorities. So they criticize that because, when you're evaluating a theory, it's important to have a firm definition of what it is and isn't, so that you can evaluate it and you know how well it performs and yeah. And then there's also a section in the book where Thaler and Sunstein really criticized the idea of maximizing choice. So they thought or stated that, just creating more choice doesn't really make a better environment for people to make decisions in. And in the mechanism to virtue, say it doesn't really prevent implementing nudges. So just because you're maximizing choice doesn't mean that you can also implement the nudges towards the best choices for the individuals. And then related to that is limiting choices can exclude the best option for some populations. So, if the government decides, hey, we're going to restrict the amount of healthcare opportunities that may benefit the population as a whole, but it also, in some corner cases, eliminate the best option for some individuals or populations. So there's some critiques there that of the book Nudge, where they promoted sometimes limiting choice is the best option and maximizing choice isn't recommended by Thaler and Sunstein. So I thought that was interesting to kind of understand the balance of what people are saying about on the other side of nudge theory. And then some examples that I've found of nudge theory at work today. I kind of went over some topics that were relevant to me and in today's world, in COVID and in parenting. So in India, there was a school that almost nobody was washing their hands after using the restroom. And just by implementing a few different nudges, like painting a path to the sink, and then increasing the infrastructure of the sink and putting footprints then on the path to the sink, that increased hand washing by over 74% in the school. So those were just little low cost, just using paint to implement those nudges that had a huge increase or impact. And then there was a study done to increase parental reading to their children, and parents got text messages to remind them how important reading was, and then also just daily reminders to log their hours and to read with their children. And the parents who got the text messages had over 88 minutes per week more of reading time with their children than parents who didn't get the text messages. And then on a similar note, there was a COVID vaccine participation study where out in, I think it was in UCLA, their healthcare system, they saw a 15% increase in appointments made through nudges that they sent in text reminders. So they sent people who were eligible for the COVID vaccine to sign up for an appointment. And then if they didn't sign up after a couple of weeks, they sent them another reminder to sign up again. And they saw a 15% increase in participation just through a couple of text messages of kind of showing them, giving them the link to where to sign up and instructions on how to make the appointment. So those are just really low cost. They weren't eliminating any choices. Any of these populations could have decided to continue down the behavior that they were. But one of the important things is a lot of these populations, they're not, they're more indifferent towards the action that they're making or the decision that they're making. And when somebody's indifferent, it's easier to nudge them towards a different, maybe more better option. So these are some of the references that I used in my research. Again, I really enjoyed going over nudge theory and looking forward to reading the rest of Nudge, and would highly recommend you all to do a deeper dive, maybe in some of these articles and studies to learn more about nudge theory yourselves. Thank you.